In this video, I'm going to review the use of the application descriptor file, which determines much of the behavior of both the application and the installer. When you create a brand new MXML application in FlexBuilder, a new application descriptor file is created for you. The name of the file will match the name of the application and will have a suffix of -app and a file extension of .xml. Here's the hello world-app.xml file that's determining the behavior of both the installer and the application itself. I'm going to maximize the editor so I can show you as much of this code as I can, but if you're following along in the exercises, you can go ahead and open this file yourself to see all of the text. The first important element I want to describe is the XMLNS attribute of the application element at the root. As I described in the Essential Training video, this is a critical bit of information to the Air packager that tells it what version of the runtime this application is designed for. The namespace that's indicated here that ends with 1.0 means that this application works on Air 1. If you see something that ends with a .0.m and then a number, that would be an application that was built for a previous beta version of Air. For current Air applications, you want to ensure that you have a 1.0 at the end and nothing after it. Next, a little further down, is the ID element. The ID element will contain the fully qualified ID that you entered in the FlexBuilder interface when you first created the application. If you want to change the ID, you can, and the purpose of it is simply to uniquely identify the application. The file name is used to determine the name of the file for the application. For instance, hello world means you're creating a file called helloworld.air. The name element is a value that's shown during the application installation process. And the version number can be used to provide information to you during automatic updates to the application. There are some additional descriptive elements down here which you can either choose to enter or not. The description, if you enter it, will show up on the second screen of the installer, and the copyright again is optional. The initial window elements actually control behavior of the application rather than the installer. In the Essential Training video, I described the use of the title element. You can set the title element either from this application descriptor file or from your main application file code. For example, if I were to establish the title element here, I would remove the comment tokens from the title element and then type in the title of the application here, Hello World. I'll then save and run the application, and notice on the title bar of the application window it shows the title. Now I'll undo those changes, save the changes to the descriptor file, and then go to the MXML main application file to the source code. I'll go to the window to application element, and I'm going to move some code around here so it's a little bit easier to see on the screen, and then I'll add a title element here. And this time, to make sure I'm seeing the new version, I'll use a different string. Hello again. I'll save the changes, run the application, and once again the application shows up, and you'll see that the title element is shown on the title bar. So there are many properties of that initial window, which can be set either in the application code or in the application descriptor file. I'll come back to the application descriptor file in FlexBuilder. The next three elements, System Chrome, Transparent, and Visible, are typically set through the application descriptor file. I described in the Essential Training video series how to use these elements and some other properties to create transparent applications, that is, applications that are like widgets that appear on the screen without any rectangular background. The next three values, minimizable, maximizable, and resizable, can be used to control what the user is allowed to do with the initial window, whether they can minimize, maximize, or resize it. By default, this application can be resized at runtime. I'll run the application and show you that the user is able to resize as needed. They're able to minimize, they're able to restore, and they're able to maximize. Now I'll close the application and return to the application descriptor file. For all three of these elements, I'm going to remove their comment tokens and then put in the word false in between the tags. I'll do that for the minimizable, the maximizable, and the resizable elements. I'll save the changes and run the application again. And this time the application will open up with a fixed size. Notice that any system Chrome or controls that would normally allow you to minimize or maximize the window are gone. And if I move the cursor down to the lower right corner, I'll find that I can't resize it. So again, these are values that are controlled in the application descriptor. The height and width of the window can be controlled either from the application descriptor file or from the application itself. Here's a very important tip. When you're building an application in FlexBuilder, make sure that if you set one of the dimensions that you actually set both. There are circumstances where if you set a height, for instance, but not a width, the application will open up on Mac OS X and not show any content. So I'm going to set this application with an initial height of 300 pixels and an initial width of 400 pixels. And I'll save and run the application. And now I've exerted very tight control over the size of the application. I can close the application, change the values. I'll change to a height of 100 and a width of 150 and run the application again. And now I'll see that the application opens up in a much smaller initial window. I'll close the application and then set the dimensions back to their initial settings with a width of 400 and a height of 300. Other elements that can be set through the application descriptor file include the X and Y properties, that is the initial window's initial position when it first opens up on the screen, and a minimum size and maximum size. So for instance, if you set the min size and max size elements and then leave resizable set to true, then the user will be able to resize but only bring it down to a minimum size beyond which you don't want to minimize anymore. There are many other attributes in this file that you can set, many of which I described in the Essential Training video series, and some of which I'll come back to later on in this video series. But for those who went through the initial video series, this will have been a good review of the purpose of the application descriptor file and how it controls both the application packaging and the application's behavior at runtime.